So when I was 19, something happened that happens to most guys, okay? And that's basically my car genes activated. And all of a sudden, I found this massive interest in cars. And as a broke 19-year-old, which by the way, I was not some famous TikToker with a bunch of money. I was broke. All I really wanted was this nice car. At first it was Mercedes, then I wanted a Porsche, but I could not walk into a dealership with cash, didn't have the cash, and I could not walk in, for example, and finance it either way because I didn't have a good credit score. I didn't have a credit score, okay? And I didn't have income to justify me actually having that type of loan on my books. But today, years later, I'm able to, for example, pay cash for a car, or I'm able to walk into a dealership and say, hey, I want that car. Here's my credit score. Here's my income. And they will most likely finance it. But I make it a rule to never finance any of my cars, even if I'm getting 0% interest rate. And by the way, usually that's a scam because it's not like 0% for the whole 5 years. That's different. It's usually more like 0% for a promotional period. You know, it's just all a little way to get you in the door and get you to buy something that more than often you actually don't need. So in this video, I'm going to break down exactly why I never finance. I always pay cash for my cars. Now, on top of that, guys, as always, like this video. On top of that, also subscribe and hit the bell so you get notified. Now, the very first thing, guys, off the rip, off the core, is that not every single financial decision that you actually make is going to be a smart one. If you think about it financially, when it comes to numbers and compound interest, the best thing would probably be, hey, you want to finance a car, find a low interest rate, you buy a used car, you pay it off in 3-4 years, you invest the difference. You want to buy a house, you buy a house, you have it for 30 years, you have inflation, it covers the cost and all these other things. But at its core, when you kind of just do the financially smart thing and not the thing that makes most sense for your peace of mind, it kind of is different. That's why financial freedom in a sense and having peace of mind are two different things when it comes to, for example, doing the smartest thing with your money. Because the smartest thing is usually leverage. And leverage means I borrow money to buy things and I use that money for other opportunities that pay me more. But then debt always in some way increases your risk. And it also has you, for example, every single month having to worry about those payments and having to worry about what if this doesn't go well. That's why when I own a car, I own my car. There is no payment to the dealership. There is no conversation. There is no loan. There is no title being held. There's none of that stuff, okay? It's just I own the car overall. Now, my mindset shifted when I started to see cars differently. I know I love cars because I'm a guy and I'm kind of stupid, okay? I love cars. Don't know why. I like speed. Don't know why. Can't explain it. Must be like the adrenaline, okay? But at its core, a car is just a car. Takes you from point A to point B. And you know, when it comes to a car, you really only care about 3 things. Number 1 is safety, because you don't want to be riding in a car that if you crash, you crash, you're done, okay? Number 2 is reliability. You want to make sure the car you're actually driving is not going to leave you in some highway. And guess what? The Ferrari is not that one. The Mercedes is not that one. The more expensive something is, it doesn't mean it's more reliable whatsoever. Number 3 is affordability, because you don't have to worry about a crazy monthly payment just because you want to be driving something crazy fancy. And when you kind of break down and dissect that, which cars are the most affordable, the safer, the most reliable? It usually comes down to the cars that are mass produced the most. And those are usually the boring cars, like the Toyotas, the Mazdas, the Hondas. I'm not saying that anyone that has those cars has boring cars per se, but they're not the fancy ones, like the Lamborghinis, the Porsches, the BMWs, the Mercedes, okay? Over the Nissan GTRs, right? They're not those cars, but at its core, those are the most reliable, safer car because they're made for the masses. So whether you have a car that goes 100, and this is when I kind of clicked for me, whether you, and by the way, there's nothing wrong with having a fancy car. I'm gonna have a fancy car, but you wanna have a fancy car once you're done with your priorities. Don't fall in love with the idea of having a fancy car. Fall in love with your retirement account. Fall in love with your financial freedom. And once you have that, you can buy something fancy because it won't hurt you. But like I was saying before, once I understood this, it shifted everything. Because whether you have a Bentley Bentayga, that goes 190 miles per hour. And I have, for example, my little Toyota Prius, which by the way, that's my current car right now, that taps out around 130 miles, something like that. Guess what? The speed limit is still 80 miles per hour. Doesn't matter how fast you go. Doesn't matter if you're sitting, for example, in leather. None of that stuff matters. If your engine roars overall, it's just, for example, like, it's just different styles. It's just different what you like or whatever. But at its core, it's the same use. We're going to get there at the same exact time if we're both following the speed limit. So that's when everything clicked for me. So when I'm looking at a car, I'm not worried about, is this fancy? Does this give me status? Can I afford the payment? The answer is I don't worry about affording the payment. I worry about, can I afford the car? I worry about, is it safe? Is it reliable? And on top of that, is it affordable? And guess what? Those three things don't fall in the category of cars that cost $10,000 or that have backup cameras or little Apple CarPlays. They fall into the cars that might be, for example, from the year 2000, 2005. At its core, we have new tech with cars, but at its core, we've been making solid cars that are safe, reliable, and also, for example, affordable for a very long time. Not just today. So keep that in mind. Now, number two, guys, is this. Cars, obviously, don't even have to say this, okay? But cars appreciate. So when you think about financing something and paying interest on something, having that thing have some type of ownership over you because you do owe money, you worry about a car every single month. Guess what? This thing that you actually buy, which most people basically usually buy new or they buy used, either way, if it hasn't, there's this common rule in finance, is it has an engine, if it has wheels, it usually just depreciates, okay? Happens all the time. Just depreciates. And depreciation just means, for example, the loss in value of something that you actually buy. So if you buy a car and it costs you $30,000 brand new, in the next 5 years, it's probably gonna be worth $15,000, like 50% less to even more. And after that, it keeps going down in value. So never consider buying a car as an investment because it's not an investment. Same, for example, this is an investment because I do Uber, or this is an investment because I wanna travel safe. It's not true. It's just twisting around words. At its core, an investment is something that protects your capital, meaning it protects the money you put into it and it gives you a good return. So you don't need to have a fancy car whatsoever. And by the way, for those people that basically do Uber and they always want to buy these fancy cars that cost a lot of money, it's probably not the best deal possible because once you are in business, you think about what is the most efficient way for me to earn the most amount of money and not spend that much money off the bat. But people tend to buy, for example, these new 2023 vehicle, new year vehicle, whatever you want to call it, and then they're driving around this thing, which basically just cuts into their profits. And that's not a smart idea either, okay? So just got to say that because there are a lot of justifications for making bad decisions, okay? Now, number three, guys, is debt holds you back. As long as you have some form of debt, okay? And I get the whole idea, Tommy, debt doesn't hold me back because I'm still financing this thing. I have this home. I'm not talking about, for example, leverage for the sense of investing. That's different stuff, okay? Even though I don't do it myself either because it's not the lifestyle I actually want. I want to live debt-free. But at its core, when you buy a car and you're saying, I'm going to pay this thing off in 5 years, and you say like it's a normal thing or the car payment like $500, that's a $500 responsibility for the next 5 years. 5 years is a very long time, man. So if you can go ahead and buy a car for like $1,000 or $5,000 and pay cash for it, and then spend those 5 years just investing, another 5 years investing, another 5 years investing, it makes a big difference. And not having that headache of every single month having to find that $500 or having to use the $500 for something else. And by the way, that car smell always wears out. And that blessing you get when you drive around that car, you feel fancy. Once the car has a few coffee stains, it just doesn't feel the same either. So don't focus on those things whatsoever. My point is, okay, it's not a necessity at its core. And number four, the last thing I want to say is, by the way, it's like for mostly all the guys out there, and also some girls, because some girls do like fancy cars too. But at its core, for everyone really, when you think about it, what you start with doesn't have to be what you finish with. My point is, when I first started, for example, investing, I started with $7. Today I have a lot more money in there. When I first started, for example, with my whole car stuff, right now I have a Toyota Prius, okay, 2014. But is that the car I'm gonna have for the next 10 years? Potentially, not really. Eventually, once you solidify, or what is that word I'm looking for? Once you handle business first, and you're able to say I'm financially free, I have no debt, I have a fully funded emergency account, I have my investment account running like crazy, on top I have a paid off home. Once you have those things concrete and you want to buy a car for cash, pay $15,000, $30,000, you're able to do that because when you think about it, if you don't have a home payment, if you don't have, for example, debt payments, you have to worry about those things. In reality, what do you have? A bunch of cash. In 1 year, in 2 years, you can save up the equivalent to buy that fancy car. And by the way, I probably will never, I say this now, but don't hold me to it because things can change, but I probably will never buy a brand new car. It just makes absolutely no sense. It's just stupid. You know, I will always look for a car that's between 3 to 7 years old. That way, I get the most bang for my buck. I'm still driving a car that's very expensive, for example, that's luxurious. Like, how fancy can you make something that just basically goes from A to B, okay? You can't really make it that fancy. You can put extra cameras, you can put self-driving technology, but at its core, it's just a vehicle, okay? It's just a car. So that's it, guys, for this video. Comment down below, though, and let me know exactly what car do you want, okay? What is your dream car? But what is the car you're willing to drive right now as you work towards your financial freedom first to then get that car eventually? Comment down below, let me know. And as always, guys, like this video, tap out also, subscribe, hit the bell to get notified. Up here is another video. Over here is my face, go subscribe. As always, long-term team officially out.